Alright, second graders, today for our math, we are going to learn how to tell time. So, how do we tell time? How do we tell what time it is? So, we use clocks, right? Good answer. So, we have two types of clocks we're going to look at today. One of them is analog clocks. So, this is like what you see in our classroom. So, what time is the analog clock here displaying? Excellent. Yes, it is 11:55. Now, some of you may have been thinking 12 because it looks like it's on the 12, but it's not quite there yet. So an analog clock uses moving hands. The long hand tells us the minutes, so here's the long hand on the 11, and the short hand tells the hour. So it's still on the 11, so it's 11:55. So telling time using an analog clock. So we have a small hand and a big hand. The small hand points to the hour. The big hand points to the minute. So when the big hand points to 12, the time is o'clock. So it is 3 o'clock. Then we have all these little numbers all the way around. These little dashes. And each one of these is a minute. So in between 0, when we're counting minutes, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So right now the time reads what? Right, 3 o'clock. So if we were to count by minutes, by fives, count with me. 3 o'clock, 3:05, 3:10, 3:15, 3:20, 3:25, 3:30, 3:35, 3:40, 3:45, 3:50, 3:55, and then it would be 4. So there's 60 minutes in 1 hour. Now we're going to look at some different types of analog clocks. So, like the one in our room, there's one type, and then we have this type here. And this is using Roman numerals. We have this clock here in the center, and then we have a watch here, which is displaying an analog clock. So the next type of clock we're going to talk about is digital clock. So how do we read digital clocks? So digital clocks show the time using digits or numbers. So the number on the left of the colon shows the hours, so this one in blue. The number on the right shows the minutes. There are some digital clocks that even show the date, seconds, but we're going to be looking at minutes and hours. So digital clocks. So digital clock shows time with numbers like we discussed. So this here is a type of digital clock. What are some other types that you have seen? Good. So some of you said a watch can also be digital. An alarm clock, so your mom's alarm clock, good. So here are a few examples of some digital clocks. And see, this one here has the time, and then here's the second temperature, the day, the month, and the date. So what is the difference between a digital clock and an analog clock? So one uses hands for the minutes and hours, Good. And the other one displays the numbers. So which clock do you think's easier to use? The digital, because it tells you the numbers. So I want to look at this just for a second. We're going to look at, I want you guys to understand that these clocks work together. They tell the same time. The time's always consistent. So it's the same. So as one clock moves, is the other one telling a different time or the same time? Good. So they should be telling the same time if they are accurate. We'll just give this a second here to pull up. So while we're waiting on this, what are some other differences between the two clocks? So yes, they do look different. They both tell you what time it is, yes. You guys all have some very good answers. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at the clock, and as I change the time on the digital clock, I want you to pay attention to the analog clock and what the time is doing on it. And then as I change the analog clock, I want you to look at the digital clock and see how these two work together. I'm not sure why. So last week we made clock. So while we're waiting on this, pull out the clocks that we made, our analog clocks with our paper plates. And as we're going through this, you can change the time on your clock as we go through this little activity. And this will only take a minute once it gets pulled up here. Here we go. Change the hour. So as I'm changing these, what do you notice? So the time is also changing on the analog clock. So now, as I adjust, we're going to go by the minute first. As I adjust the time on the analog clock, what do you notice with the digital clock? So it is doing the same thing. They're working together. Now we are going to go back over to our presentation. I just wanted you guys to see how those two work together. And now we're going to practice some together. So on this first part, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the analog clock and we are going to put in the time on the digital clock. So what time does the analog clock display? So it shows 3:50. Good job. Alright, so what do we need to put here? So it is, oops, we put a 3. bigger. And then what would be our minute? 50. Good job. The 350. So let's look at the next one. So what time does it show on the analog clock? What time does it display? Let's look at the hour first. So it is 5. It's not quite to that 6 yet, is it? And what are the minutes? 55. Very good. You guys are getting good at this already. So what time is the analog clock displaying here? 9:25. Very good. We'll get that put in here. How would we put it on here? 9 and then 25. So now we are going to look at the digital clock, and we need to display the correct time on the analog clock. We're going to do the hour first. What would the hour be here? So it's 5 on the clock, right? But it's 45, so is it going to be closer to the 5 or the 6? The 6, correct. And then 45, we'll just spin this around here. Where's the 45? Is it here? Nope, you're right, it's here. So 5:45. So let's look at the time here. What is the time on the digital clock? 9:10, correct. So where does our hour go? Is it going to be closer to the 9 or the 10? So to the 9, correct. And then where's our minute hand? On the 2. Good. So let's try another one of these. What time is on the digital clock? 11:15. So where's our minute hand going to be? On the 3? Good. And our hour? On the 11. Alright, so for today's activity, we are going to do Ready for the Bell. But I'm going to be setting some different times. Each of you have a clock face recording sheet. So when I set the timer, I'll be setting it for hour, half hour, and minutes, like we've talked about. So when you hear the timer ring, you're going to look up at the clock, and I want you to record the time on the clock face by drawing the hands on the clock for the hour and for the minutes. And then you're going to write the time in number form like the digital clock also on your recording sheet. And I will be coming around the room as well to help and see how you guys are doing as we go through it. Are there any questions? Alright, so I'm going to set the first time and listen for the timer.